Hello, good morning, everybody. Let me just adjust this. Hey, congratulations, Leslie. I would recommend, if you're speaking, to not talk to Leslie before you approach the stage. There's a level of inadequacy that you have as a result of her education and accomplishments, so that really bums me out. A couple of things, let me just put that there. There we go. You're welcome for the hydration, which I didn't quite realize we paid for, but it's cool. Okay, so first of all, I also want to congratulate Linda and Aaron and kind of the entire team that puts this event on. This is the first time that I've been invited and the first time that I've attended this event. I just didn't have the appreciation of sort of the scale, the magnitude, just the content, the richness of the entire program. So it's very cool. It's very cool for me to be here. I told the team yesterday, I told them the story yesterday, that I had been to the Cayman Islands before on holiday with my family, actually a little over a year ago. And the last time we were here, we did one of those kind of romantic sunset horse rides, on the North Beach with the family. It was all very cool. Sun's going down. My horse kicked my wife in the foot, broke her foot. We experienced the Cayman healthcare system, which was actually very, very good. And when I told my wife I'm coming down to the Caymans to participate in this event, she said, "I am never going to the Cayman Islands again." I said, "Okay, well, you weren't invited, so that works out fine." Okay, so here we go. So today, I think the plan was when we sat down and thought about the opportunity that we have to spend today. We thought about a lot of different subjects and a lot of different topics to just talk about with this group. And as you look through the program, as I said earlier, there is a real richness in terms of the content of the other sessions and the speakers. And so we wanted to do something a little different. Keep it somewhat at a high level, but different. And we initially started with, should we just do sort of a macro market update, what's happening in the insurance world, certainly given the events over the last 3 to 6 months, kind of an outlook of where we see the business in 5 years. And we ultimately said, no, the fact is there's a lot of content and opinions that are generated weekly on that subject. So let's do something different. And this idea about the intersection of people and risk, which is something that we spend a lot of time talking about, but we thought it might be interesting, just an interesting perspective. Okay, so what I'm going to do, if I can get that to work, I'm going to need your help in the back. There you go. Thanks, guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover just 3 general subjects. If these slides go out, so help me God. I will find that horse and I will kick you. So we're just gonna cover sort of 3 general subjects, right? So we're gonna talk a little bit about sort of this intersection of people and risk and give you a perspective on that and share some data. I will tell you there's lots and lots of data in this presentation. So not trying to overwhelm you with facts and figures. But lots of information that we want to make sure we cover. We're going to talk about the 4th Industrial Revolution, kind of what it is and why it's important in the context of people and risk, and again, give you more of a perspective on that. And then we're going to drill down on one specific example, which is cyber, which we're spending a lot of time, the industry is spending a lot of time talking about. I know it's a big subject at this conference as well. And then try to weave all that together, and then sort of end it, if we do this right, with a what's next, but really it's more about a so what. So what does all this mean and how should we think about it as practitioners in our industry? So let's get started. And I don't want to make this a Willis Towers Watson commercial, but I did want to sort of start with this. So, and from 2 perspectives. So when Willis and Towers Watson merged, there was kind of this view of taking some very discrete capabilities, putting them together in order to kind of leverage and have this different perspective. And this is a quote from our CEO, John Haley. And And so this is really where it emanates from, this kind of convergence of risk and people. And we've been spending certainly a lot of time in advance of our organizations coming together and since then thinking about it. And we'll talk a little bit about how that's played out. But I also wanted to comment on one other thing and tell you just, I don't know if it's a funny story, but I'll tell you a story. So this was June 30th of 2015, and we had just announced that Willis and Towers Watson would be merging. So we issued a press release at 7 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, a lot of work had gone into this. Issued the press release at 7 o'clock in the morning. And at 7:20, my cell phone rings. And it's a very, sort of long-time, dear, old friend of mine who works at one of our larger competitors, a firm that does not begin with a vowel. Just let you figure that one out. And so he called, and I answered him like, "Hey, how you doing?" He goes, "Hey, I saw the news." He said, yeah. He goes, "It's going to be a disaster." Wow. So now I don't know if you're like me. Hopefully you're not. Hopefully you're not like me. I don't get mad. Like I don't know. I don't have the energy to get angry about things. I just get sarcastic. And which I wouldn't recommend, by the way. It's not a great way to raise a family, I'll tell you that much. You're better off getting mad. So I kind of, switch into sarcastic mode. And I said, wow, I got to tell you, and I'll leave out this person's name. I said, listen, I've always known you were an incredibly talented and insightful and sort of gifted executive. But you've proven yourself more than I ever could have imagined. That in 20 minutes, you have been able to analyze what took 4.5 months of 2 management teams, a bunch of investment bankers, lawyers, and 2 boards of directors of public companies that ultimately said this is a good deal, and in 20 minutes, you completely debunked it. I mean, you are good. That is amazing. 20 minutes in a press release. That's all you read. And you have the vision that this is going to be a disaster. You are amazing. So he called me a name that did begin with a vowel, and hung up. Now, the point of that is it's around change, right? And it's around perspective. That, and the business, as we'll talk about, is going through a lot of change. And we need to embrace that, like it or not. And change, I was joking with somebody that, for the last 10 years, every Monday, I've started a diet. 10 straight years on Monday. I'm not on a diet, okay, but I've tried. I've attempted to take better care of myself, and change is difficult, right? But what's more important is the perspective that you as an individual have on that change, right? Lots of people have opinions about how things should be, about how things are. In this case, my friend in 20 minutes had his opinion on this new company that I was going to be a part of. I would not allow yourself to be so greatly influenced by the perceptions of others. Speak for yourself. Do the analysis, think about it, what it means for yourself as you're leading through change, participating through change. It's a great opportunity, but the world is full of critics, and you need to do a much better job blocking them out, okay? Okay, so question time. This is the only part of audience participation, so this is the only time I'm going to ask you to jump in. What percentage of accidents are caused by human error? Anybody got a guess? 80? Did somebody say 99? That's unfair. 100. Okay. Really? Stop. Okay. I'm going to go with 80. Okay. I think it's actually 90. 90. It's not 100. Whoever said 100. It's 90. And if you were to look at the auto stats, the claims around auto stats, it's around 94%. Is what it runs. So, the reality is, when we think about risk, and certainly in our business, but just broadly, it really is all about the people at the end of the day. That's what it comes down to. So I want to give you another, one quick example, and this is on Wells Fargo. And Wells Fargo has obviously, over the last couple of years, had some sort of well-documented issues. But what's really interesting about Wells Fargo is if you know the firm, they are a very, very well-run firm and a very well-respected financial institution. If you think about the history of managing through the financial crisis, which they did brilliantly. But Cliff Rossi is he's actually on the faculty at the University of Maryland, and focuses really on risk management, and focuses principally in FI. And we sort of captured this because we think it really illustrates what the issues are. And I won't read his quote there, but he talks about that the organization is actually world-class in managing market and credit risk. They're very, very good at that. But it was the people piece that they struggled with the most. And at the end of the day, that was really the enabler of what took place at Wells Fargo. And we tried to sort of give you a sense of, well, what does that really look like? And I talked about sort of market risk and credit risk. And the firm had all the right policies and procedures. They had all the right governance. The pay structures, which you could argue, but they had values. The firm has and had values. But that wasn't it. It was kind of this iceberg thing, and it was what's going on below. What is actually kind of going on in the heads of the colleagues of the organization? How do they think? What motivates them? And ultimately, that was the risk that they actually assumed and ultimately played out in the situation that they're dealing with. Now, Wells Fargo isn't the only organization. Right? You can look at the VW example with the emissions issue, and you could go on and on and on. That we have a view that the underlying issue in so many of these things is really around the people. Not necessarily the processes, not the training. It's around the people. And how do you get at that? So here I told you, we've got a bunch of stats, and some of these things I wouldn't say are incredibly current. So don't Google all this stuff. But these are just interesting facts if you think about it, and it all relate to human behavior, right? These are all matters of human behavior. The IRS loses 200,000. Now that wasn't a big surprise to me, but that's just me. I fly a lot, so the fact that 38,000 commercial flights, landed in troubling conditions did not make me feel good, right? And these are all around human error and human activity, right? So you can't say there isn't an intersection between people, how they're wired, how they operate, and the risks that organizations face in the world we live in today. And I know I'm not telling you something you don't already know, if you think about your own business. So what I want to try and do is actually connect that. So we talk about sort of this intersection. Well, what does that really mean? And the way that we think about it is there's this kind of relationship between risks to human capital and risks from human capital. And it goes back and forth and back and forth. And I've listed some examples of sort of risk to human capital, and I won't go through all those. But a couple of them I will mention, sort of misaligned culture, right? Unclear organizational roles, lack of role clarity within an organization. Financial concerns, safety, poor and adequate training. Those are all risks to people, all risks to the human capital of an organization. Now, risk created by human capital, things like compliance, discrimination, productivity and efficiency, reputation, brand, lack of innovation. And these things just flow back and forth, back and forth. They're dependent on one another. I'll give you one example and really credit our colleagues in our consulting business and our human capital and benefits business, that you can look at employee engagement, and there is a direct link between employee engagement, patient satisfaction, and medical malpractice. And when organizations typically talk about medical malpractice, my sense is, you know better than I do, my sense is they aren't necessarily focused on employee engagement. There's lots of other mitigating factors that may take place within an organization. But if you're sitting down with an underwriter talking about the risk, you're sitting down within the organization talking about the risk, I don't know if we're actually talking about employee engagement, and we should be, because there is a direct link. So the higher engaged a workforce, higher patient satisfaction, better medical malpractice outcomes, and vice versa, right? So you can look at this a couple of different ways, right? Whenever you think of risk, you think of negative. I would look at this and say, there's upside here. And the upside is in business performance. That if you actually think about where are those linkages within your organization, And it requires you to think differently. It requires you to actually think outside the box of what risk normally is, whether you want to call it enterprise risk management. But you got to collaborate and think differently across the organization. But if you do, I promise you there's opportunity. There's gold there. And the gold is business performance. It's differentiation. It's sustained financial performance. So I think these slides are available. At least I hope they're available. So feel free, as long as you hire us, feel free to use this information. No, but seriously, it just takes some time and think about how within your own organization those linkages may or may not exist. But I promise you there's an opportunity for increased business performance if you leverage this appropriately. All right? Okay. So now I'm going to pivot, just the natural pivot, into the fourth industrial revolution. That makes perfect sense, right? Has everybody heard of the fourth industrial revolution, just as a concept? Is it? Am I the only one? No? Okay. Does everybody know what the first industrial revolution was? Audience participation again. If anyone could say the word, anyone know? Steam. Steam. That was part of the first industrial revolution. Then came automation. So think of kind of the Model T and the production facilities that we knew. This was kind of late 1800s, early 1900s. Then computerization, right? So that was the third. And the fourth that we're in is now really all about data. It's all about sort of information, and this massive information. What makes this different is that if you think about the first three were about advances that benefited humankind, right? They made it easier, made people making decisions easier. Think about computerization. They made manufacturing things easier. They sort of benefited people. This is different because basically data and technology are actually taking the place of decision-making of people. So now technology is making the decision for you, not helping you make a better decision, but in fact making it for you, which is a really, really big shift full of a lot of issues. Sorry, can you go back one? Thank you. So for definition purposes, the foundational element of this is really just this massive amount of information and data that is being created. And I'll give you some stats on, well, what does that really mean? Put that in better context. And then around, everybody's heard of the Internet of Things, right? Which is around connectivity. So it's not just the data, but it's the connectivity, between all of this. I don't know how many of you, so our car, we own a car, and I get a call from the car dealership. It says, hey, Mr. Jones, your car told us that it needs to come in for service. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? What do you mean my car told you? Yeah, yeah, my car was connected to a system, and the dealership got notified, and and I had no idea that my automobile was connected to some broader network, and they were watching me. And that is what's happening today more and more and more and more. And when you look at how much data is being created over a period of time, we have this stat, 90% of the world's data that exists today was created in the last 2 years. So you think about the speed and the volume of which is being created. One more question. Does anyone know what a zettabyte is? No? Hang on, say that again. A gazillion. You sound like my 14-year-old son. Come on, a gazillion. No. Yeah, I do have to look this up. Actually, it's 1 trillion gigabytes. So one zettabyte is 1 trillion gigabytes. And we're projected to have 44 zettabytes of data and information by 2020, right? It's astonishing. So a couple of other stats I want to read to you, just in terms of the volume. So every minute, there are 204 million emails that are sent, every minute. Now, I thought literally I got most of them. at least it was feeling like I got most of them. It's astonishing. 220,000 photos are posted online every minute. 220,000 photos are posted online. And those photos have GPS. They have recognition software to know who's in the photo. So and all of this stuff is being captured. All of this stuff is being tracked. Boeing which I was fascinated by. Boeing collects 1 terabyte of information on every flight they take. Think about how many flights they take, and they are connecting a terabyte of information on that, and everything, from the engine to the systems, everything, all of this information. So we are literally being overwhelmed with information. But what do we do with all this stuff, right? So what we do, and everybody's heard about artificial intelligence, right? That's kind of the new thing. And somewhat, you think about kind of the arms race of what was when I was a child. Well, now the race is really around AI. And who's gonna win that race? But now we can develop computer systems that they can make decisions, as I said earlier. They have the ability to be visually perceptive. A colleague of mine was on, kind of made a customer service call, was on a line, I can't even remember the name of the firm that he was talking to, and kind of hit the buttons and got somebody on the line. And he's having this call, and he's asking questions, and he's getting answers, and he's going back and forth. And 5 minutes into it, he realized he was not speaking to a human being. He was not speaking to a human being. And up till that point in time, the inflection, the ability to actually respond in a timely manner to the question, he thought he was talking to Fred, to Sally, whatever. And he realized he was talking to a robot, and that scared the living crap out of him. But that's what we're dealing with. That is the kind of change. Machine learning is sort of that next evolution, right? So, there's this programming, and sort of it does what it's programmed to do, but historically machines have never learned. They've never continued to evolve, really without intervention. Does this sound like kind of science fiction stuff, right? But that is the direction of travel. This chess, so everybody, back in 2007, sort of, whether it's Watson or Google or, the chess champion they beat, Go. Does anyone know what Go is? Everyone heard of Go? I hadn't heard of it. It's this Chinese, it's very, very, very complex, much more complex than chess. It's a Chinese game, very, very difficult, and a computer just beat this grand wizard, in China. And then my favorite is poker. That the machines now can bluff, they can lie, and they can detect when you're lying. That is kind of the evolution of what's happening in terms of this, fourth industrial revolution, AI, machine learning, et cetera. It's scary, scary stuff. Some more facts, and I'm not going to talk about all of those, but I'm going to talk about 3 of them specifically. So with all of that as a background, what does that really mean to our workforce? What does it mean to the people that are in organizations today, or people that are coming into the organization today? And again, I'm going to focus on just 3 points here. One in kind of the middle upper there, what companies feel today is we've got almost 40 million shortage of skilled workers. That based on the way technology is moving, what's required, we've got a shortage of almost 40 million people. What's more alarming is the 90 to 95 million of low-skilled surplus that we have, where we have people that do not have the skills to fit in the operating model going forward, and we got to do something. We've got to find a way to deploy that talent some way, right? That is a very scary, scary fact. The one right below that, so 41% of companies have contingent employees. Everyone know what a contingent employee is? Think of like a seasonal workforce, right? Where you hire people based on demand, and that number is going up as people can take advantage of technology and no longer have to employ somebody over a full period of time, but only employ them when we need them, okay? All of that creates a ton of stress on the people aspect of the workforce and how we're managing, those people assets. So all of that is happening at a time where speed has never been greater. So you won't know these stats. So this is how fast it took to get to 50 million users. Okay, 50 million users. The telephone, 75 years. Maybe not a surprise if you think about when the telephone was invented, okay? Radio was 38 years. 38 years for the radio to get to 50 million users. The TV was 13. If you're like me, when I grew up, we had one TV. It was 13 inches. It was in the living room. I was not allowed to go near it, but that was it. We had one TV. Now my son has got a TV in his pocket. He can walk around. It's crazy. The internet, 4 years. It took 4 years to get 50 million users. But the world record goes to Pokemon Go. 35 days. It was Angry Birds 2. It was 48 days. And then Pokemon blew it out of the water. And it's funny, right? I mean, but think about that. Just the speed in which technology gets out and the way people can access it and how inexpensive it is, right? So the pace of change that we're in the middle of experiencing, what's sort of in front of us in terms of what this fourth industrial revolution is going to bring to us in terms of risks, et cetera, is alarming, right? And I'll talk about when I get to the what's next and so what, a point of view on that, which I hope will be helpful. So I mentioned we wanted to use cyber just as an example, one, because it's incredibly topical. And I know it's a big, as I said, I know it's a big session that's being discussed here today. But I bring it up because it really is one of these very, very clear scenarios of where people in risk come together. And we can define that very clearly. Again, kind of in the stats category, and connecting it to this industrial revolution, the growth in technology, the speed in which things are being developed, you have these issues. And some of these stats, this is 2016, I promise you that when the 17 stats are published, it will be more alarming. But if you look at the frequency, the frequency individuals are attacked versus businesses are attacked, the 83% of companies took weeks before they realized they've been hacked. So it wasn't instantaneous. It took weeks before they knew they were attacked. And email phishing, you think about WannaCry and what happened there. Email phishing is the predominant way this goes out. And our organization does a lot of training on this. It's hard. I mean, I joked earlier about getting emails. I'm sure you guys get lots and lots and lots of emails. And every now and then you'll stare at an email and you're like, I don't know if I should open that. Now, I don't know who it's from. I don't know what it's about. There's an attachment. But I have opened an email that was part of the internal training exercise. And, and then the big X pops up, and then the IT guys are running down the hallway, and I'm like, dude, sorry. So it's just difficult, right? It's just really, really difficult to manage the risk. But the fact is that is that is the major way they get this stuff out there. But what is really interesting, and I'll show you the stats on the claims, that employees are the root cause. That at the end of the day, when you look at these situations, it really isn't technology that's the cause. It's employees. And either their negligence or their malfeasance, which drives the majority of the claim activity and really the risk. So I talk about sort of this intersection of people and risk, but it's more than that. This is one of those really rare areas where you've got so many different aspects of risk, whether it be operational, potentially even political if you think about it, regulatory, technology, that all sort of come together, which really, really make it complicated in terms of how to manage the risk. And I'll talk in a minute about some of the stats in terms of what kind of the overall market looks like in the direction of travel that's happening. But we think, and this gets back to kind of this intersection of people and risk, we think that if you sort of embrace the people aspect of the risk and include that as part of the mitigation and strategy process, you will have a higher likelihood to get a better outcome of dealing with something that is very, very complex and that all companies at some point in time will have to face, okay? I talked earlier about, so this is the stats on claims. So these are claims that have made its way through the insurance system and sort of the source of, and you'll see that 2/3 are as a result of employee negligence and malfeasance. So it's not a breakdown in technology, it's just people doing things they should not have done and exposed the company, a la like I did, hitting on the attachment that I shouldn't have. It's got a profound financial impact as well. And again, some of these stats, I promise you, if they were current for 17, are only going up. So $400 billion impact to the global economy. And this is, I joke a lot about my kids, but my kids just think, there's like a money tree in the backyard. And, oh, hey, I got a cyber incident, now somebody goes to the money tree. No, we all pay for this. This is $400 billion that goes right in or right off, the global economy that makes its way back into either the price of goods, labor, et cetera, certainly the financials of organizations. It's the top 3 most cited concern in any survey. And within the boardroom, and we talk about 80% of boards, I will tell you, having been in our boardroom, it is a regular agenda item at every board discussion. And we talk about this $148 billion market. What that market is basically services, right? That would include insurance premium, which I'll talk about in a second, consulting, et cetera. So it's a $150 billion market and booming, growing at a 20% clip, because everybody's getting into the space to provide service. They're providing insight, they're providing training, whatever. So this is a business that is growing rapidly, and one obviously that we believe isn't going to go away, but it's how we can better manage it and how we can sort of get in front of it. From an insurance perspective, so we estimate sort of $3 billion of premium in 2017. Think about $3 billion compared to $150 billion. So I said earlier, there's a $150 billion business that's generated out of the cyber business or cyber industry. Insurance premiums are only 3 of that, right? So insurance is really at its very, very early stage of having a real impact, a real financial impact in terms of this industry, but again, growing at a very, very rapid rate. I talked about the insurance capacity that's available. 80% of what's being written today is written in the US. I will tell you that when GDPR comes online in Europe in May of next year, Europe is going to explode, and it is going to become a fast-growing market. You see the industries that operate there, and now 60-plus companies that are available to provide some sort of capacity and product around cyber today, and that number was probably 15 3 years ago. So this is a very, very fast and evolving market, but it is a huge opportunity for us as consumers of the product and those that are exposed to the risk. So the what's next, right? And I said earlier, sort of the so what, like what does all this really mean? The reality is, if I've sort of indicated anything, is all of this presents an amazing opportunity for you, right? So I shared sort of this perspective that we see, some of these things kind of converging, and the convergence of this creates sort of this interesting point of view on how we can manage risk, how you can manage risk. I said earlier, but it requires change. You really need to sort of think about your organizations differently. It requires a lot of courage, and it requires a lot of innovation. And the point on that, really bringing it to this room is full of innovators. You would not be at this conference if you weren't considered a real innovator within your organization or within the industry. What you do is very innovative in terms of the overall risk management and insurance industry. And frankly, something that I think is sorely lacking within the business is innovation, right? When you think about, and we're involved with an organization called Plug and Play, and I don't know if anyone's heard of this. It's an incubator accelerator. That's a mouthful. It basically incubates companies, so funds them, and then sort of gets them off the ground from concept to sort of up and running, right? And we partner with them really because they have 400 investments focused on the insurance space. Think about that, okay? They have 400 tiny companies that want to put me out of a job. That's how they spend sort of every day waking up, how they can either disintermediate distribution within our business, create greater speed, greater throughput, greater certainty, you name it. So when we talk about InsurTech and kind of what's happening in the world of InsurTech, I can tell you it is coming, and we want to embrace that. We want to absolutely be a part of that. But it gets back to this sort of concept of innovation and embracing innovation within your organization. I think the other piece that has been certainly a learning over the last 2 years for me is I've historically always really just focused on risk. I've thought about sort of hazard risk, liability risk. It's really just been sort of risk. And as I said earlier, I think if you have the ability within your organizations to kind of lift your eyes up a little bit, think about how you can collaborate more effectively across your organization, you will be of more value to your firm. You will provide greater products, greater advice, better insight, but you're going to have to do a better job kind of connecting with different parts of the organization in a way that you haven't in the past. And I would encourage you to do that. You're going to create a lot of value and be able to get in front, of a lot of these issues. So, as I said, I think disruption and change can be a really powerful thing for good if you have the right attitude. And as my buddy at Marsh said, if you look at it not as a disaster, but a real opportunity to do something different and have a different perspective and really add a lot of value, you can do that. And I'm counting on this audience as the real innovators in our business to do just that. So thank you very much. I'm done, and you know what? I've actually got 10 minutes. So I'm going to take questions, if anyone's got questions. This is a risk, I want you to know. I did not plan on this. Anybody got any questions? Yes.
Curious your perspective on cyber insurance. Do we make ourselves as companies, as individuals, a greater risk because we have insurance available for those that are looking for ransom?
Yeah, I don't think so. It's a good question. I don't think so, but I think where we've kind of missed the mark is connecting that process, kind of the insurance process, with sort of the other parts of that chain that we talked about, sort of the regulatory, the technology, and what we think is people. So I wouldn't look at it so much as, having the insurance makes us, more of a target in terms of potentially having an issue, as much as if we actually, kind of go through the process of the insurance piece, but do it in a way where we connect the dots across the organization, the risk, if you will, organizationally, is dramatically more improved, right? And I think insurance can kind of help enable that, as much as it becomes, hey, they buy a big limit, let's go get them. But it's a good question. Yes, I'm sorry, can you see my bald head? Okay, yeah. I can see your white hair. Yeah. 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 So the question was, we're collecting a lot of data, and in doing that, are we just sort of heading for this apocalypse? That was my word, not yours. I think that's basically the question. Within that, I think you asked the right question, which is, what are we doing with it? So it's not so much how much are we collecting. It's what value are we deriving out of it? What are we doing with that? And again, I'll sort of speak for me personally. I didn't grow up as a data miner, right? I mean, I didn't. Sort of mining and interpreting data was not my major in college, and it's not what I focused, the early part of my career on. And so much of us that operate in the industry really don't know what to do. We've got all this stuff, so what do you do with it? So it really takes some sort of quality assets within an organization to really understand and be able to articulate, how do we take all this stuff and actually make value of it? And where we can't, how do we discard it? How do we not just get bogged down in the volume, but only use what's really fit for purpose in terms of our company, sort of the industry, et cetera. But back to that's another really good question and observation, because as I said, the accumulation of this isn't slowing down. We're just going to get more and more and more and more. And I think how we go through that process of really figuring out sort of value, will ultimately determine whether or not this is good or sort of the apocalypse. I mean, I was going to joke earlier. I was going to end with, your challenge is to figure out who Keanu Reeves is in your organization, because somebody's got to kill the machine. Yeah, I'm half joking, but you sort of think about where we're heading. That's not completely and utterly out of the question. Okay, one more. That's a good-looking coat. I'm going to go with you. Yeah.
Is cyber almost like a burning house where it's actually market risk versus workplace risk?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Isn't cyber risk almost akin to a burning house whereby it's not really workplace risk,
Yeah.
it's like market risk?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you. Yeah, it's funny. I didn't grow up as an underwriter, but I struggle with this risk, underwriting this risk. How do you really underwrite this risk in a way that, one, you can do it profitably across a portfolio, given all the statistics I just shared with you, right? So it kind of connects to the question about, well, how do we use insurance as part of an overall process, because it's going to happen. So it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And whether or not that process allows you, to have a bit of a better outcome and not necessarily a covered loss or an insurable event, but something that's much more manageable. But you're right, I would agree with you. Okay, that's it for me. This has been fun. Not really. This has been fun. So, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the conference.